Welcome to the climate change poster. How does climate change occur? Our climate has always been regulated by gases, including carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide that blanket the Earth. These gases trap heat that would otherwise be reflected out to space. Without them, our planet would be too cold to support life. We refer to these gases as greenhouse gases for their heat trapping capacity. Changes in greenhouse gas concentrations occur naturally due to events such as volcanic eruptions and variations in solar energy. However, in the past century, human activity associated with industrialization and use of fossil fuels has increased the concentration of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere at an accelerated rate. There's a direct correlation between increases in carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas concentrations and global temperature. This is now widespread consensus among scientists regarding the warming of our climate and this cause. So when we talk about climate change, we break it out into three different types of categories: sea level rise, temperature, and precipitation. First, we'll talk about sea level rise. Sea level rise is caused by four factors. There's more water into the ocean system from the melting of glaciers that's caused or accelerated by warming temperatures. Warm ocean temperatures create denser, warmer water, taking up more space, moving into our land. The coastline is sinking from the last glaciation, so this is called land subsidence. It's a very minor influence to sea level rise, though is notable. The land side is rebounding from the weight of the last glaciers, which is causing the shoreline to sink. And finally, another very minor cause of sea level rise is the magnetic pole. Shifts in our magnetic pole are naturally occurring at geologic timescales, very slow, with a minimal influence on sea level rise. In the last century, we've experienced 11 inches of sea level rise in Boston Harbor. By mid-century, scientists project around 4 feet, and by the end of the century, 7 feet or greater of sea level rise. The implication of that kind of sea level rise, according to a recent article in the Boston Globe, translates to a potential loss of up to 5% of the tax revenue from houses in a sea level rise zone, just for the town of Plymouth. In addition to sea level rise, Plymouth has experienced severe coastal erosion since the 1890s. Areas such as Plymouth, Long Beach, the mouth of Eel River, and Manomet Point have had erosion rates of 9 to 15 feet per year. In the last century, we have experienced an increase in global and Massachusetts temperatures by 2 degrees. We're now going to talk about temperature changes and climate change. Small increases in average temperature has far-reaching impacts on weather and natural systems. For example, 2 degrees may not feel differently to you on a 65 or 63 day where you might just grab the same sweater to go outside. But since the 1980s, Boston has had an increase in the growing season by over 2 weeks, 14.3 days. Also, Boston area is experiencing a reduction in sequential cold days during the winter by 4 days. So we're having more frequent changes in cold to warm temperatures during the winter. One way we talk about how temperature is going to affect us with climate change is extreme heat, or days that are greater than 90 degrees. Using a baseline of approximately 8 days over 90 degrees today, scientists project greater than 22 days over 90 degrees by mid-century and greater than 50 days over 90 degrees by the end of the century. That translates into a climate that looks more like Georgia and Alabama, respectively. For precipitation, the Northeast has experienced a 71% increase in precipitation in the top 1% of storms. A 1% of storm is like a winter storm Riley that occurred in March 2018. This is occurred in the last century, from 1890 to today. And Boston has had only a 10% increase in precipitation only in the last 30 years, making our precipitation regime more likely to Portland, Oregon. By the end of the century, by the year 2100, a 1% annual chance storm, or commonly known as a 100-year flood or a storm like Winter Storm Riley or the Blizzard of '78, will become far more frequent, with a 25% chance of occurring in any given year. An example of how our precipitation is changing here in Plymouth is in July of 2008, when Plymouth experienced 5.7 inches of rain in a single storm in July. Changing precipitation regimes and warming will also increase the probability of drought or the severity of drought. For example, in December of 2016, typically when drought, we start to see more excessive precipitation, all of Massachusetts was in an extreme drought warning, except for Cape Cod. This was the second worst drought in Massachusetts history. Drought can cause low water supply in the aquifer, low stream flow in rivers and streams, affecting natural systems and wildlife habitat, and increased vulnerability to wildfire. This is particularly important for the town of Plymouth, which has a widespread pine barren forest. A pine barren forest is a fire-dependent forest with pitch pine, resinous, and highly flammable cones. And Plymouth has an extensive history of large and widespread wildfire. The good news is today we have cellular phones and wildfire management strategies that have reduced the risk of wildfire as an imminent threat.